Chapter 9 Hide and Seek. The doorbell rang. Jesse and Daisy grabbed each other as the house filled with the sound of Rock of Ages. St. George must have been leaning on the bell because the tune played over and over and over again. Emmy rolled aside the head of cabbage and bounded into Jesse's arm. "Bad man, come!" she whimpered. "Hide me, hide me, hide me, hide me!" Over the dim of the doorbell, they heard the back door slam. Uncle Joe was running through the house calling out, all right, already, I'm coming." Then they heard the front door open. Mercifully, the doorbell fell silent. A murmuring of voices came from the front hall. Emmy had burrowed beneath Jesse's t-shirt. She was trembling. "Where can we hide her?" Jesse whimpered to Daisy. Daisy shook her head and frowned. Then her face lit up. "I know. Come with me." Jesse followed her down the hall to her parents' room and into Aunt Maggie's walk-in closet. Everything in the closet was an apple pie order except for her shoes. Aunt Maggie had a lot of them, far too many to organize, so she kept them in 3 big wicker baskets in the very bottom of her closet. Daisy tipped over the basket farthest from the door and dumped out all the shoes on the floor. "Put her in there," said Jesse. Jesse lifted his t-shirt. "Don't worry," she said to Emmy. "We're going to hide you really well. All you have to do is be very quiet and still." She set the dragon in the center of the basket. Then the cousins carefully piled the shoes on top of her. They stood back to look at the effect. Emmy was completely covered, but some of the shoes were moving. "It's fine for you to move around and get yourself comfortable," Daisy told Emmy. "But once you're settled in, you can't move. You have to stay very still." "Stay still, not move," Emmy said from beneath the shoes. But the shoes were still moving. "Not move, not move, not move, not move." The shoes were churning around. Jessie sighed. "No yakking either." "Emmy, not yak. Emmy, eat." Emmy said, "Emmy, eat. Emmy, eat. Shoo." Daisy's face took on a look of panic. "No! Listen to me. Do not eat the shoes." "Food!" Emmy crooned. Jesse slapped his forehead. How can she be hungry at a time like this? "I'll find you something," Daisy said to Emmy. "Only please, please don't eat my mother's shoes." Emmy's head erupted from the pile of shoes. "Food!" "Hush, Emmy," Jesse said sternly. "She's going to get you something, but you have to keep your voice down." Daisy flew back into the closet with a bottle of Tums in her hand. "It says on the label that these have calcium." She opened the bottle and dumped some of the colorful tablets into her hand. She knelt down and held them out to Emmy. "Try and see if you like it. Quickly." She watched as Emmy, maddeningly slow, took a pink tablet into her shiny talons and nibbled at it, then popped it into her mouth and crunched the dust. "Tums, good." "At least she won't be suffering from acid indigestion," as Jessie said. "And she can read," said Daisy, tucking the bottle next to Emmy among the shoes, then covering Emmy and the bottle with more shoes from the bottom of the other baskets. The cousins took one last look. A soft crunching sound was coming from the pile of clothes, but at least the shoes weren't moving. They backed out of the closet and closed the door. Then they closed the door to the master bedroom and ran up and down the hallway until they got to Jesse's room. Jesse quickly booted up the computer and slipped in a CD of his favorite video game. Daisy rolled the head of cabbage under Jesse's bed, tidied up the evidence of their thwarted escape. Jesse was pretending to play, and Daisy was pretending to watch when they heard a knock on the door that they were expecting. Daisy went to answer. "Hi, Poppy," said Daisy. Her voice sounded odd. Jesse swiveled his chair. Uncle Jesse was standing in the doorway with St. George right next to him. Seeing St. George practically inside their bedroom was enough to make Jesse want to pick up his computer and heave it at the man's head. "It seems," said Uncle Joe, giving them each a careful look, "that Dr. St. George has misplaced his lizard. Again." "Gee," said Daisy, "that's too bad." "She probably hates being in your lab," said Jesse. His hand flew to his mouth, but St. George pounced on him. "Then you've been to my lab, have you, boy?" "Of course not," said Daisy. "He just figured you have a lab because you're a whatchamacallit herpetologist." "Herpetologist," Jesse said. "That's herpologist," said Uncle Joe. "And didn't you guys tell me you were going to the college for a visit today?" Daisy gave her father a scalding look. "We decided to go to the Dell," Jesse said flatly. "We had something more important to do." St. George bared his perfect teeth in what passed for a smile. "I suppose you're having a wagon fiddle lesson instead." He wrenched his bandaged hand out of his pocket of his coat and jabbed a finger at them. "You children aren't fooling me. You sneaked into my lab and stole my lizard, and I want it back." Uncle Joe cleared his throat. Guys, if what he's saying is true, and I'm not saying that it is, and you need to come clean and tell me. The lizard isn't yours. It belongs to Dr. St. George." Jesse said in a small voice, "But Uncle Joe, we don't have it." "Honest, Poppy," said Daisy. Uncle Joe closed his eyes and sighed. "Well, fine then. If that's the case, then you guys won't mind if we check the sock drawer. That's where they were keeping the lizard." Without waiting for an answer, Uncle Joe went to the sock drawer and opened it. He dug around in the socks for almost a minute before he said, "No lizard." Then he turned to St. George, whose figure hung in the doorway like a long, black-headed bat. "Your lizard isn't here. Sorry." St. George said icily, "I am too, but I'm not leaving until I've conducted a thorough search of the premises, and I mean every nook and cranny." "Now, you wait just a minute," said Uncle Joe. "If you refuse, I will go away and come back with the police. I promise you, we will turn your cozy little house upside down," said St. George. My lizard is here. I know it," he said, looking at Jesse and Daisy. "I can smell it." Uncle Joe heaved a big sigh. "Poppy, you're not going to let him," said Daisy. "I don't see like we have much choice," said Uncle Joe. "You know something, guys? The whole lizard thing has gotten way out of hand." What came next felt like the world's most undelightful game of hide and seek, as Jesse and Davy nervously followed the man search party from the attic to the basement. By the time Uncle Joe had put his hand on the doorknob of the master bedroom, the cousins were nearly sick with anxiety. "I thought the master bedroom was off limits," said Jesse. "In games of hide and seek, they were never allowed in there." Uncle Joe closed his eyes and shook his head. "Guys, this stopped being a game a long time ago." The cousins slouched in the doorway as St. George looked under all the furniture, and Uncle Joe went through every bureau and drawer. Finally, reluctantly, with a whispered apology to his absent wife, Uncle Joe opened the door to Aunt Maggie's closet. The closet was big enough for all of them to crowd in among Aunt Maggie's sweet-smelling racks of clothes. In such close quarters, Jesse picked up the unbearable stench of St. George's breath. Strangely, there was not a trace of the smell of hot chili peppers. Uncle Joe took one side and St. George took the other, and they worked their way through the racks. They searched every pocket and sleeve, then every drawer, cubby, hat box until they came to the corner where the shoes were kept. St. George picked up the first basket and dumped it on the floor. "Easy, buddy," said Uncle Joe with a frown. "Some of these shoes are Italian." St. George went through the shoes one by one. He even looked inside them. Not that Emmy was small enough to fit in a shoe anymore. Uncle Joe emptied the next basket himself, much more carefully. St. George tossed the shoes every which way. Then he seized the third basket and turned it upside down. Boots and pumps and sandals thundered to the floor, and St. George dropped to his knees and pawed through them. Any second now, Jessie expected him to find Emmy. Instead, he came up with only an empty bottle of Tums. And something else, something bright and sparkly. "We told you we don't have your lizard," said Daisy, shooting Jessie a puzzled look. Jessie was too relieved that St. George hadn't found Emmy to worry about where she might have gone. "She probably ran away because you treated her so badly," Daisy said. "Or maybe somebody from the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Lizards rescued her." St. George held up the bright, sparkly thing in his fist. "It was here. It was. This is my proof," he cried, "a hoard of gold and precious gems." "Actually, hoard is a misnomer," Jessie muttered under his breath. "Hey," Uncle Joe said, "that happens to be the garnet necklace I gave my wife on our 25th anniversary, and I'd like it back if you don't mind." He plucked the necklace away from St. George's hand and added coldly, "I think we're finished here." Dinner was nearly a silent affair. Uncle Joe had little to say, and Jessie and Daisy kept their worries about Emmy to themselves. And after they ate, Uncle Joe pushed his chair from the table and said, "I'll do the dishes. Why don't you two go upstairs and stay out of trouble for a while?" Jessie and Daisy nodded and went to Jessie's room. Jessie booted up the computer while Daisy watched. "First, we let them steal her. Now we lose her. Professor Anderson is going to skin us alive," Jessie said. The stern, bearded face appeared on the screen, and Jessie clicked the mouse. He cleared his throat and started with the good news. "We got Emerald back from the Dragon Slayer." The professor's dark eyes twinkled, and he stroked his beard. "Ah, congratulations! Very good work, you two." Jessie took a deep breath and launched into the bad news. "But we lost her." He went on to explain as clearly and succulently as he could how the Dragon Slayer had searched the house and how Emmy had disappeared from the basket of shoes where they had hidden her. To Jessie's relief, the professor didn't even look upset. "Intriguing," he said. Jessie and Daisy watched his expression and waited for him to say more. At last he said, "It's possible she has simply found herself a more effective hiding place." "But St. George is gone," said Daisy, "and Emmy still isn't back." "Regardless of what you may have read about dragons," Professor Anderson said, "they are not aggressive. They are by nature prey. They do not. Their first instinct when faced with danger is to run and hide." "All right," said Jessie impatiently. "We already got that." "Sometimes for years," the professor added. Daisy draped herself over the back of the chair and groaned. "Then again," said the professor, "there is the very slightest chance she might be masking." "What's that?" Jessie asked. "Normally dragons do not acquire the ability to mask until they are 1 or 2 years of age. But your dragon has already proven that they can scry, so she may be an early masker." "What is masking?" Jessie asked again. The professor frowned. "On the whole, I'd say a very handy defense mechanism. Just as lizards, such as chameleons, practice camouflage, dragons are capable of masking themselves as other creatures or things to elude predators. In his mind, Jesse saw those instincts called walking sticks, which can look like twigs. He saw those tree frogs that look like leaves. Could Emmy be hiding with the kitchen canisters or the box of old records in the basement? Maybe she'd been among Aunt Maggie's shoes all along and they hadn't seen her. Do you think she's masking somewhere in the house? Daisy asked the professor. The professor's response was immediate and emphatic. No! And then the screen went blank. Jesse slammed his fist on the table. This guy is beginning to bug me, he said. At least that irritating grinding sound didn't happen this time, said Daisy. But we still have to find Emmy on our own. And that's the end of the chapter today. Our next chapter is called Dragon in a Haystack, Chapter 10.